Wholeness and welcome. This is Josh Dipple of Integrating Presence. And today I have Melissa Mayer, right? Not Meyer. And just so if the gals at the coffee shop that I sometimes work on with the computer are listening, I have to ask, are you any relation to John Mayer?
No, I am not.
Okay, well, at least I asked, right? So I tried here. How are you doing today, Melissa?
Doing really great.
Hey, we've only chatted a little bit with text, and I've checked out your website and some of the topics that we kind of converge on, but I don't really know you, really know much about you yet. So why don't I just throw it over to you about, what, tell us a little bit about your life and your work, please.
Sure. Well, thank you so much for having me, Josh. And so I'm a mother and a holistic physical therapist. I live on the East End of Long Island, and I wrote a book called Recovering My True Self. It's about my transformational journey, donating my kidney to my husband. So that was the transplant itself was in 2018. And, I describe in the book what I had as a divine wake up. I mean, just a deeper spiritual connection with myself, with spirit after the surgery, leading up to it. I would have, characterized myself as a spiritual person, but never a religious person. I grew up with, I grew up in a suburban New Jersey area with, strong Christian leanings and, but never really resonated with me. So I started practicing yoga. I'm a certified yoga teacher. I practice meditation. I've been to Buddhist centers, and that always resonated with me more. But also, well, in addition to prior to the transplant, I started reading A Course in Miracles. I was always a big fan of Marianne Williamson. So I'd heard reference to it many years through Wayne Dyer and Louise Hay, and said, but saw the book and thought it was super intimidating. But then opened it up and said, and the course says, when you know it's your time, it's your time. And I guess knowing that I had this huge, life, obstacle in front of me, I said, I think this is my time. And it does use a lot of Christian language, the word God, for example. And that at first was a little, I was like, I don't know if this is right for me, but something told me to just keep going. And what really resonated was just a miracle is a shift from fear to love. And that was revolutionary for me, because no matter how many times I meditated or went to yoga or did things, I would find myself in the pattern of negative mind chatter, which I think we can all relate to. It's the human condition. And just saying, this is fear-based thinking. I need a miracle. I need to shift from fear to love. And then with the transplant, I kind of got on my knees in a moment of spiritual surrender and said, God, if that's what you are, I need a huge shift from fear to love. I'm fearing this thing, and I need to be in a place of love. So I felt like when I woke up from anesthesia, I got this, not really like verbatim message, but like miracle granted. You're going to be okay. Your husband's going to be okay. Your kids, your family, your life, you're going to be okay. We're here with you, spirit, the entity is with me. And it changed my life. I mean, it changed my life subsequently afterward. I am a physical therapist. I always had an interest in metaphysics, holistics in my leanings in my work, but it really gave me the courage and conviction to really practice in a holistic manner. I stopped drinking afterward as a result. I felt so clear and focused. And I said, I don't want to muck this up with anything. So that was, I would never consider myself prior to that an alcoholic, but I was a highly sensitive person. I still am. And I was numbing myself with alcohol. And I didn't realize any of that until I stopped drinking. And my writing was just coming so clear. I felt like I was channeling spirit through my writing and through my work. And I said, I'm not taking any chances by poisoning myself or, just kind of setting myself up to fail. I noticed that alcohol would really interfere with my negative mind chatter even more, especially the next day, waking up feeling like I could not stop the thoughts in my head, even more so. So the clarity was profound, and it still is.
We kind of have similar journeys in a way with that. My own thing with alcohol, when I first started meditating, um, it just got gradually over time, where I used to go out with company culture and drink and just have to tell people who got blackout drunk the night before kind of things they did and what they forgot. I would always remember. I would get up and I wasn't really that hungover. But as I started meditating, and after I hit rock bottom and noticed such a huge difference, how quickly it helped me right away, that eventually within a year, I just less and less, it got to the point where I would drink one beer and be like hung over for like almost a day, sometimes even longer than a day. It's like, this is
Yeah.
ridiculous. Why even bother if one drink is even going to do that? So as well. Mhm. The Course in Miracles stuff, I'm barely a little familiar with it, but these quotes you have on your website from them are really powerful. And if I'm just going to read them, actually, it's just 2 lines here. Nothing real can be threatened. Nothing unreal exists. I think that's so amazing. And for real, I equate that with truth too. There's a guy on Insight Timer who says his tagline is, the truth is all there is, right? So that this is a clarifying statement to that, nothing unreal exists. And the fear thing you speak to is really powerful, because I know I've struggled with that early on too, but it's also like a reference point and a training for becoming fearless and becoming courageous too, right? And so when we go through those tests and trials in a way and come out the other side, we can become a hero for those still going through it, and a hero in the good sense of the word too, not like the cliche sense of it as well. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well said, all of that. And just to kind of piggyback on it, you know, nothing unreal exists. Basically, only, and it goes on in the course to say, only love is real. Fear is an illusion. So I remember years ago discovering Eckhart Tolle and how monumental, his work was to say that I'm not the thinker. And of course, in Buddhism and other spiritual philosophies share that too, that I mean, that was freedom right there, because people would say, oh, you're a good person. And I'd say, and I think to myself, no, I'm not. I have these terrible thoughts in my mind. And when Eckhart Tolle said, no, you're not that, that just gave me so much freedom to say, oh my gosh, thank you. And then in the course, it continues with, we're all love. I mean, we're here, we're created, we're extensions of God, we're love. And anything else is fear, it's illusion. And it just helps guide me when I'm thinking about things, a situation with someone where I'm like, who was right and who was wrong? And I'm like, it's all illusion. I can just rise above all of that. And, again, we do it in meditation and mindfulness, when you just sit still and you transcend all of that, all of the suffering and all of the thoughts, you realize only love is real. The right side is just love, above it all, where, and you realize too, you start to say, when I am in that fear-based place, it's just an illusion. And when other people are, you start to forgive. There's so much in the course about forgiveness, because you forgive yourself when you deviate from that, and you forgive others. Because we can point our finger all the time, say, look at that person, what they're doing is wrong. But you start to say, I forgive them, because it's an illusion, and I can transcend all of this, and I can be free. God doesn't need me to police the universe. And, we just have to be in a place of love. And then when we demonstrate that place of love, that is what really inspires, uplifts, and it connects people to what they are and what they know to be is love. And I would find in Buddhist texts, A Course in Miracles, so many places, I'd say, how does this person know? Because these are universal spiritual principles. It's like, one truth, many paths.
It is. And that was a huge shift for me too, is when I found out, oh, I'm not my thoughts. What? Oh my goodness. That it was so freeing, because I was so identified with thinking, right? And then the love thing, another way to put it too that I found helpful is that it's either love or a cry for love, right?
Mhm.
And so, yes, and then there's this tagline I like to repeat, even though where it comes from, I'm not totally in alignment with everything there, how it's conveyed. But this bottom line on this website, whatonearthishappening.com, is all is love, fear is an illusion, um, all beings are free, truth can never be destroyed. And
Yes.
so it's just like, that's one of the bottom lines there are out there, and that I know of.
Oh, I
Um,
got chills.
and so since we've talked a little bit about kind of the spirituality side and Buddhism side, I want to get into physical therapy and your work. But I guess before we do that, why don't we jump in a little bit to the Buddhist stuff? I tell people that I'm not technically a Buddhist. However, I have had a daily meditation practice since 2012. I study and practice Buddhism. I do podcasts and shows about it as well.
Mm.
So it says you have an interest in this. And also, you know, we talked a little bit about stop drinking alcohol, as people who are familiar with at least the Theravada Buddhist precepts, not refraining from intoxicants is one of the precept trainings. And we talked a little bit how helpful that can be. Maybe you can elaborate on that, but also traveling to these, well, the Buddhist country, Sri Lanka for sure, India, I guess a little bit maybe, but then also Africa. So that's plenty to chew on here. So the
So,
Buddhism thing, alcohol, and then your travels.
yeah, I'll start with Buddhism. Local, the Long Island Buddhist Meditation Center. It's led by a Sri Lankan monk, Bhante Nanda. And it's an incredible place. It's a wonderful community of people. I'm really grateful to be a part of it. And, it was a couple months, I've been going there for years, and certainly prior to the transplant. But a couple months after the transplant, a good friend of mine who helps run the temple called me up and he said, Melissa, we're going to Sri Lanka. You need to come. And I said, Don, I just, we had surgery a couple months ago. I'm wrapping Christmas presents for the kids. I can't go to Sri Lanka. And I was in my writing room and I was working on my book. And then I thought to myself, when have I ever been invited to Sri Lanka? What kind of opportunity would that be? And as I'm writing a book about, transformation and all these things, and I said, and, maybe I could get some real good work on my book done in Sri Lanka. So, I just had this moment where, and the first chapter of my book is called Life Outside Your Comfort Zone, and it was, again, one of those moments of like, step outside your comfort zone and say yes. So I said yes. And it ended up being the cover of my book. On the cover of the book, you see me on the top of Mount Sagiri. And I mean, it was this incredible, incredible trip. I mean, Bhante Nanda was, our local monk who's the teacher there. He was being recognized by the president of Sri Lanka. There was literally a ceremony where the president bowed to his feet for bringing Buddhism to the West. So just to be there, I mean, we were kind of like his entourage, so to speak. I mean, that was, this incredible moment. And that was at a very, elaborate kind of, I don't want to say banquet hall, but like, a conference center, like in Colombo, Sri Lanka. But then we also went to the forest monastery where he did his training as a young monk. So we got to have experiences like that. I mean, meditations under the Bodhi tree. We were connecting with local villagers and their, head monk. And I mean, it was just like, it was a trip of a lifetime. I mean, and part of me when I was sitting on the bus writing, because we traveled all throughout the countryside, was saying, I almost said no to this. But, it ended up being this incredible experience. And the last chapter of my book is called Sri Lanka. And I just talk about that trip in more detail because it was extraordinary. And just to tie drinking back in, and kind of the ending of the book, we were sitting around the pool at one evening, and this one monk who was from Sri Lanka and had, there was a language barrier because he spoke Sinhalese, but he was so jolly that, it was like love and happiness would just kind of transcend barriers. But he was noticing some people were having a little glass of wine or something, and I wasn't. And he said, you drink? And I said, no. And I'm thinking to myself, how am I going to describe kidney transplant, over a language like this? And So I'm trying to explain, I had a kidney transplant, I donated my kidney to my husband, and I don't drink anymore after that. But he understood. And when he heard that I had donated my kidney to my husband, he just stopped and looked at me in this reverent way and said, "Thank you." And I mean, for me, that moment, to have a monk and somebody who, I mean, I watched him for the last week. I mean, the country bows to him. I mean, he's someone who gives the shirt off his back, the food in his hand to somebody. To have his approval, or to have him say thank you in that way, it was so powerful. And so, yeah, so that's kind of been some of my experience with Buddhism and meditation through the center. India, I was there um, as a physical therapist, delivering continuing education to through an organization called Healthcare Volunteers Overseas. In the States, of course, we do continuing education as medical professionals, but in India, they don't really have that kind of access and service. So healthcare professionals are sent over there to deliver continuing education. So I got to work with physical therapists in the hospital, teaching courses that I had taken. And it was an extraordinary experience. I wouldn't say I really connected with really any Buddhism there. I did stay in an ashram after I taught, but, and that was even amazing because I was like, there's a lot of, I was at Christian Medical Center, actually. There's lots of pockets of where missionaries have started hospitals and communities. So they were actually Christian based. I mean, the country is just such a diverse group of cultures, language. So yes, I wouldn't say I had too much experience with Buddhism in India. And Africa, I went on a yoga retreat with a not-for-profit organization that was delivering different care. And my friend was the yoga teacher. And we just got to travel around with the not-for-profit, seeing like some of their work projects and missions. And then, of course, got to do safari since we were there, which was pretty incredible. So yeah, those 3 trips weren't exactly related, but each one kind of got me hungry for the next. I went to India first when I was before I had my children, and was a young physical therapist, and then Africa when my kids were, kind of young and saying, maybe I want to travel again. And then Sri Lanka was the most recent, and prior to COVID, of course. So
Well, right
yeah, I'm
on.
really grateful to have all those experiences.
Cool. Yes, the Sri Lankan. It's there's going to be there's an upcoming retreat that I'm thinking about going, that Bhante Sujato might lead there. He's a prolific translator, and I don't know if I'm going to go or not. But I like you said at the beginning, choose to get out of your comfort zone. But yes, travel is a great way to expand the mind, expand consciousness as well, at least for some people, right? Um, uh, and so now, I guess, for lack of a better transition here, let's jump into kind of like the meat and potatoes, so to speak, of your work. Physical therapist. So you've had training, right, in traditional physical therapy, right? But then you kind of transitioned, maybe away from that a little bit. Now, what I just want to say here, I don't have any experience whatsoever with physical therapy. The folks I do talk to about it, I know one of my yoga teachers just had a hip replacement, and her friend, who was a yoga teacher of mine too in the past, she had the same hip replaced. And I see this happen, I think, more frequently now than I could remember, when I was younger. I don't know. However, there's like 3 main kind of stories or things I see with people doing physical therapy in the traditional Western model, for lack of a better word of that. You get the one, it's just like another prescription, right? It's kind of like taking a pill. They're told to go do it, so they just do it, right? It's, there's really no questioning or anything beyond that, which is okay, right? As long as the system works, and it's good for them, well, then I guess that's okay. I don't know. I can't speak from experience. The other one would be like kind of a people pleasing thing, right? Oh, I'm doing this, I'm doing exactly what they say. I'm going to get better. I just follow exactly what they say, and that's all I have to do, that kind of thing. That's not quite as common. The other one is kind of like, oh, this is kind of constraining. They're not real. They can only kind of go by the book, and there's only a few things they can do, and it's very limiting, constraining, and it just they don't seem to be doing all they could, or there it seems like there could be stuff beyond this that could help me too, but I'll just kind of go
Exactly.
along with it because I don't know what else to do.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Exactly. And that's that. I mean, you hit the nail on the head there. I mean, I went to physical therapy school, and because my uncle had had a stroke, and it was I used to go with him to his physical therapy when he was at a rehab facility. And I felt a real deep connection to the work of trying to get this person to walk again. I'd always liked sports and exercise, but I'd also felt a deeper connection to healing and to health. So I was like, here's a good start. But right from the beginning, I felt a deeper need to be a healer, but I just didn't know what that meant. And I said, I want to learn the rules before I can break them. So went to school, and I'm glad I did it that way, because I mean, the traditional healthcare model is complicated, and you know and for some reasons, for good reason. I mean, the body is complicated, and you have to know how to recognize red flags, and to know when shoulder pain is shoulder pain, or when there's something a lot deeper going on, like a hemorrhage, or so I'm glad, just to practice safely, I'm glad I went down that road. And then, not to mention, there's complexities in different healthcare environments. I worked in hospitals and outpatient centers and rehabs. There's so many different diagnoses and things that, and nowadays it's even more complicated. Patients have, you know, so many diagnoses, and you have to know what those are and how those connect. So I'm glad I went to physical therapy school in a very traditional manner. And physical therapists, in my experience, are very ethical people, very thorough knowledge, well-educated people. So I'm proud to be a part of that field. My husband's a physician. I do very much honor people that practice in the traditional healthcare setting. If you're sick, the doctor is a really good place to start. But I think a lot of us these days are realizing, after we see the doctor and get our blood work done and get our screenings done to make sure there's not something more damaging and dangerous that needs to be treated appropriately, a lot of us are just kind of are longing and realizing that we need something deeper. And practicing in traditional physical therapy clinics for years, and dealing with, like you said, just the limitations, documentation, insurance, overscheduling. I mean, physical therapy practices have to schedule people every 15 minutes if they want to pay their bills, if they want to pay for the building to have electricity. So, in that sense, it gets overstimulating, it gets overwhelming, a lot gets lost. There's not enough time with the practitioner. And being a highly sensitive person, I mean, that would really start to get to me at the end of the day. I'm like, I'm seeing all these people, and I'm not even connecting with them. And it was just hard, and it almost made me want to leave and stop the work. But then, after having my children and really connecting with myself as a mother, and connecting with Waldorf Education and just some of those education practices that really focus on the whole person, and kind of, coming and finding myself again, said, no, this is my work and I want to get back to it. So I started getting back slowly and picking up shifts. And then, with the kind of more grounded base, said, how can I work within this? And then, before I knew it, it was time for the transplant, and had that divine wake up, like I explained earlier, wanted to write a book about it, which was totally therapeutic. And then I said, you know what? I went to a yoga class in my neighborhood, and the yoga teacher who owned the studio said, why don't you start doing some therapy sessions here, like private sessions? And I said, that would be perfect. It's in a yoga studio. The space is right. The energy is right. I can get people that are hurt back to their yoga practice. So I started there. And then people were starting to say, like, well, just come to your house, this way you don't have to pay rent, because I felt like I had to charge them a lot, because I had to pay rent with the studio owner. So people started coming to my house. And then with COVID, we did a nice renovation. So now I have like my own healing space that is just set up for them. It's down in my basement, but it has this earth energy that is really amazing. And I can do body work with them, myofascial release the tension from their body, and do yoga poses with them. And I do acupuncture cupping. I mean, there's just a lots of different, energy therapy and clearing. And then at the end, we always do a final meditation to just relax, connect, ground, and kind of, like I say, like turning the computer off and back on and resetting it to just let everything kind of come together. So I love it. I'm grateful to find this niche. And it, it took a lot of time getting here after, like I said earlier, the transformation kind of really gave me the courage and conviction to say, what you've wanted to do. You've wanted to do this for years. Now it's the time. And it just all came together.
So cool. The point you made at the beginning is really important too. Having, knowing the rules before you can break them, and just having that grounding and knowledge and training in how everything works. I mean, so you have that huge reference point, and you have all that knowledge and wisdom, and you can now bring it even to your own house, which I think is really cool. Because if some people get into like a yoga studio, mostly it's a cool space, right? But it's kind of impersonal in not the best ways sometimes. I mean, some places are really great and people connect in a community right away, but if it's somebody going into their own home, the person cares about the space, right? And it's actually kind of a part of who they are in a manner of speaking. So
Yeah.
I feel that's really helpful. And the person, there's a trust there too, letting someone in your house for healing as well. Now I have to ask though, I mean, I'm sure you get this on most of your other interviews, and it seems to be like the most kind of life-changing event, not only for you, but if anybody would have gone through this, having a kidney transplant. So might as well just talk a little bit about that before we get into, I'd like to talk about some of the education things. I'm interested in some of that, but this huge life-changing event of going under the knife. I mean, actually having your own body cut open in order to help another, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, it was my oldest daughter's 10. So when I was pregnant with her, I was sitting in the midwife's office, and my husband, who, like I said, is a physician, but was a resident at the time, came to meet me, and I knew something was on his mind. And he had seen a new nephrologist because his old one had retired, also at Columbia Presbyterian, where, we had worked in New York City. And he said the new doctor said it was time to get it, he needed a transplant. So, on some level we knew that this was a possibility, but to kind of get it at that time was intense. But at the same time, thank goodness we talk about our meditation practices that grounded us. I said, all right, well, what do we do? And he says, we need a donor. So thankfully we had family and friends that were willing to get tested to be a donor. I was pregnant at the time, but the best match was me, and I wanted to be the donor. So at that point, the nephrologist said, well, you have a living, willing donor. That results in the best outcome. We can wait a little longer, to watch your creatinine, your kidney levels. We can monitor them. And then when we get to, kind of we were at a red flag point, but when we get to the real red flag, then it's time to, really spring back into action. So they didn't know if that would be 6 months, a year, but miraculously it was 7 years. So I was able to have my first daughter, able to have my second daughter. We moved out of New York City to the East End now, where we live, this beautiful beach community. I was able to connect, like I said, being a mother, and which is transformational in and of itself. And then it was 7 years later where the doctors, because they were monitoring him closely, said, okay, now it's time. So then it was a scramble of chest x-rays and all this diagnostic testing to, really get it in motion. And I was doing lots of inner clearing work. I was doing lots of meditating, beach walks, writing, just all these things to like therapy. Like I was by myself a lot. Like I couldn't really be around too many people. I just had to really stay like grounded and focused. And like you said earlier about alcohol and one drink, I had noticed the week before the transplant, I'd had one glass of wine, and I said, and my mind started going. And I thought to myself, I need to be focused here. I'm going to have surgery. This is a huge moment emotionally, vulnerably, physically. I need to be focused. I can't have any of this. I can't have this distraction. So I stopped a week before, and, again, just doing kind of all that inner preparation work. And then when I described earlier, that kind of moment of spiritual surrender, I mean, I remember laying on the table, and I wrote about this in my book, just affirmations left and right, just looking at everybody saying, I bless you. I wish you, the highest good, for all the energy that you put into me. May it be professional, may it be purposeful. I was talking to my kidneys. I said, goodbye, left kidney. You've served me well. Continue your divine mission. Right kidney, I know you can handle the work of, my body on its own. And just like the whole time, just staying in this kind of grounded, meditative space. And then when I went to sleep, just waking up, it was just this, it was so transformative. I mean, that's why I wrote a book. I said, I have to tell this story, because when I woke up, I said, I can't believe what's just happened. Like, I mean, my life has changed. This obstacle became an opportunity, to serve, to connect, to recover my true self, which is the title of the book. So yeah, it was very, very powerful and profound.
Thanks for sharing that. And we'll the that inner talk and is so cool too. People might think that's, if they didn't know that in context, if you're just talking to your internal organs like that, people might think that's a little silly. But when people would consider getting cut open and having something taken out, right, then it doesn't seem so silly anymore, right? It seems like a really grounding, beneficial strategy as well. And then as that
Absolutely.
seeps in, right, and how it actually is of benefit and it works, the power of the mind and intention too. And you can just tell
Definitely.
by the way you put that forth, and embody
Thank you.
that. It's beautiful.
I worked with an intuitive reader right before the surgery. She had never met me before. I was on the beach, but that's what she does. She does intuitive readings, and she was reading me like a book. She's like, "I see water." I said, "Yeah, I'm sitting at a beach," and I said, I'm having this really huge life changing event happening before me, and she said, "I see spirit inner wrapped around your organs. I see it in you. I see your spirit guides surrounding you. I see your organs wrapped up with this energy." And just hearing someone say that. And then I had a reading with someone else who said, I'm getting messages to tell you to believe in your bones. You're from your grandfather who passed away when I was a child, who said, believe in your bones. And so once I started just hearing from different people, and feeling like this, there's so much, there's a lot more going on here than just what you can talk about on the surface. So I want to tap into that, and I want to connect with that and have that guide me through this. And I felt like I did have like hands holding me, throughout the journey.
Very cool. And of course, in traditional Chinese medicine, kidneys are linked to water, right? And
Mhm.
so, yeah, being at the beach and living where you live on Long Island, being surrounded on most sides by water, right? Pretty much. Um, so now you mentioned your children too, and I've never married and I don't have kids that I know of, but I am interested in, for my niece and nephew, and just education in general, because I know my education, well, I would say schooling journey, it wasn't really much education, had been fairly challenging for me. So I'm fascinated by kind of even homeschooling. Now, and I'm familiar a little bit with Waldorf education, but not much by name alone, mostly. But you also mentioned these terms, alternative education, which I just mentioned, but attachment parenting. I feel that's going to be highly psychological with the attachment thing, which is another interesting thing. In Buddhism, there's non-attachment, but it's healthy to have attachment in parenting, right? But also the simplicity parenting. I haven't heard of that. So any and all of these you'd like to talk about, I'm interested in, however
Yeah.
you want to approach those.
Yeah, I'll just kind of touch on each one briefly. So attachment parenting, and there's books and lots of people who maybe would define it differently, but how, the reason I write about it and mention it is just, especially when your child is born, a peaceful birth process, whether or not you have a home birth or with a midwife, but in a natural environment. So, I've heard people say peace on earth begins with birth. So just like a peaceful birthing process for you and for the child coming in, and then breastfeeding, co-sleeping, just things where baby wearing, the child is attached to you. I mean, that's in traditional cultures. I mean, that's how it always was. The baby would be, in a sling on the boob. And then at night, we didn't have separate bedrooms and beds, just kind of this really like primitive way, but not primitive, maybe primal, in a way that just makes sense for a developing human that was in your womb to want to be close to your body. And then they naturally leave. They start walking and they walk away. So, people would say, "Oh, aren't you worried they're never going to get out of your bed or off your boob?" And they are in school now, far away from me. I mean, they move and they grow, and kind of the lesson of teaching independence through having dependence met, where we're just like, they need to be independent. And it's like, well, how about they will be independent once they feel their dependence on somebody is met and no longer needed. And I'd say that's really the foundation for simplicity parenting, Waldorf education. Simplicity parenting is a parenting movement led by an author by the name of Kim Jong-Pain, who's an extraordinary psychologist. He's written tons of books and worked with people all over the world. And what I think is most interesting, probably to you and listeners, is he talked about working with children in Southeast Asia that were living in war zones. I mean, these children were experiencing post-traumatic stress, but then working with more privileged families in the UK and noticing that they had similar tendencies of these children that were dealing with post-traumatic stress. And that fascinated him. And when he tells that story, that fascinated me. And instantly it was like, yes, because we live in the States, we know, why are children who are so privileged and have everything, and, of course, not everyone has everything, but even people with low incomes have iPhones, it's like, we all have these things, but why does everyone seem like they're in this state of post-traumatic stress? So he talks about, the 4 principles and pillars of just rhythm, especially focusing on the inhale and the exhale, the rhythm of the seasons, the rhythm throughout your day, not this tight schedule, but, after eating, running around outside and then coming in and reading a book and just, and again, it's so mindful. Like, I mean, I loved it. I mean, it resonated with everything I was doing. Being very cautious with screen time. I don't want to say no screen time because that triggers people, but really, we all know it's like eating junk food. We don't want to give it up, but we know it's bad for us. So the emphasis on that. Also, simplifying the environments. Children don't need these crazy light up toys. They stack up rocks by themselves outside if given that opportunity, and just and also protecting them from the adult world. People say you don't want to shelter your children, but the young child does not need to know what's going on in the news. I mean, they have no context for the atrocities that are going on in the world. So a lot of people, think like you have to treat them like a young adult, but the young child really needs to be nurtured, protected. Their imagination that they are born with is beautiful. I mean, we watch babies and we're in awe, and we're like, we have to preserve that and let that be. And so Waldorf education is, again, all connected to it, because Rudolf Steiner, who actually developed it in 1919 in Austria, but there's schools all over the world. It's not so much filling the child's head with knowledge, but the connection to themselves. Because he also came up with biodynamic farming and anthroposophy, which is the connection of the human to itself. And that's what I loved about it. The young children they're out there raking leaves and playing in the snow, and then working in the garden in the spring with farm animals, and they're painting, and, and it's not a free for all, I mean, there's no, we're not going to do that right now. It's not just like this, I think people think like a lot of these parenting techniques means like, let the child rule the roost. And Kim Jong-Pain talks about, being the governor, the gardener, and the guide. With a young child, you're the governor. I mean, you don't scream and yell, but no, we're not going to do this right now. And then when the kid, and then that's the thing, it evolves. And then when the child is 10, which my oldest is 10 now, she doesn't need the governor. And in fact, that really kind of breaks our trust when I'm more of now her, gardener, where you're looking at the weather, you're assessing the conditions, like Kim John Payne uses these beautiful metaphors. You're kind of, you're assessing things and putting it together. And then when they're teenagers, you're the guide. You're guiding from your experience, you're sharing what you've known, but you're letting them, it's natural, they leave and they come back. But I noticed that with myself. I moved to California and it was really hard leaving home, and I remember, my family had a hard time with it, but realizing, and then that was natural. It was natural for me to want to, to leave. And then, they come back, but just understanding that cycle and that rhythm. So I just loved all of it. I learned so much in it, and thinking, gosh, this is what I would have loved growing up. So I think we make parenting decisions based on what we wanted growing up, that would have really helped me when I was a highly sensitive child running around, not feeling like I had much rhythm and knowing what was going on in the world. So it was really great. I really embraced it, as you can, as I'm
Yes.
sure you can hear.
I can pretty much agree with all of that. It all makes so much more sense than a lot of the different models. And at the same time, folks are doing the best they can. If they could do better, they would. And then we also reparent ourselves too, right?
Yes.
But I've noticed this in my niece and nephew that, it seems like up to maybe like 5 or 6, they do need they need attention all the time, right? They need to be very close, total nurturing all the time, lots of time and attention. But then after that, when they start to go into more what you're talking about, along those lines of getting into the gardening stage, right? And now I thought there was another point I wanted to pick up on there. The Waldorf school, there's a farmer's market in St. Louis that I went to. They had the winter's farmer's market at one of them before. It was a really cool place. So with the education, I guess we can start to wrap it up here. Is there anything else you'd like to leave the audience with? And also be sure and tell people where they can get your book, what kind of events you have coming up, how people can get a hold of you, your website and social media, anything else you'd like to plug or promote too.
Yeah, thanks. So this is really great. And to find out more about me and my work, you can go to www.melissamayer.org, MELISSA, Mayer, MAYER.org. I'm on Facebook, of course, as Melissa Anthony Mayer. My Instagram is Mel May Evolve, but really my website has my blog and where to get my book and information about holistic physical therapy and podcast events and things like that. So that's really the best resource is my website. And I guess I'll leave with, since we do kind of share, Buddhism and Eastern philosophy. So there's a quote by Lao Tzu: "A man who knows others is wise. A man who knows himself is enlightened." And I saw that on Insight Timer because I use that as my meditation app as well. And I love sharing that as I kind of close out a podcast because, my book and my work, it's an offering to others, but it always, a lot of times too, is, to learn myself, because learning myself is how I can help serve others, and, in the Course in Miracles, it talks about too, just, when you're connected to love, that's how you serve the world. You extend the love from spirit to others. And the love has to start with you, not in this selfish way, in a way of, if anything, like suffering with the ego is selfish, because, it's all about you when you're in your head being victimized by the thoughts in your head by your ego. That's selfish. But when you're in a place of love and you can practice that and extend that to people, that's why we're here, not the job we do or the money we have, just how we serve through love.
So beautiful, so poignant too. And I tell people in the Christian tradition sometimes, love your neighbor as yourself. But if you don't love yourself, how can you love your neighbor to the degree you that makes sense, right?
Absolutely.
So thanks so much for joining, Melissa. It's been a pleasure. And
yeah, it's great. Thank you so much for having me, Josh.
You're welcome. And may all you listening be blessed with an optimal, ideal level of consciousness and energy. Bye now.